Hi, Andrea St. Amand here. Today we're going to talk about one of our biggest fears and kind of what the answer to that is, if there is one. And that's sharing something that is a very spiritual, very special experience to you, sharing that with somebody, and then having them not validate you, or worse, not just act like you're crazy, but almost do it in a real belittling way. And that reaction from so many people has gotten a lot of us spiritual folks running and hiding back in our shell and not feeling confident anywhere to talk about our experiences. And I think it is so important to share all of our experiences in a very safe way. But that idea of, well, how do I know what you're saying is true? Prove it. Prove it. That's hard. And I had, I'm going to give you several vignettes here in this video. I had a lot of you guys know I used to give tours. I still do for private events because I like telling stories about Charleston's ghosts and witches and vampires and all that stuff. And it's fun. And so I got a request to do a private tour, a private group event for a group of lawyers coming down. It was all women. And I was like, oh boy, I know actually what they're going to want to talk about. They're going to want to talk about what it's like to go from being a lawyer to being a storyteller and then to being a psychic medium. I knew they were going to go down that route. So I went there with them. I gave them the tour. It was at night, which I also normally don't do. And they've been, drinking all day and drinking all evening. So they were walking around. And of course, at some point in the evening, they wanted to talk about, well, what's it like being a psychic medium, and how did you step out, and how did you learn what you're doing? And they wanted to just kind of talk about all that stuff. And I said, at one point I made a crack, and as soon as I made that crack, I knew I probably shouldn't have made it. I said, when I was a kid, I was hearing voices in my head, and my mother was a psychiatric nurse, and I actually diagnosed myself from her medical books on the shelf as being a paranoid schizophrenic. And I said, it's nice to know I'm not, but that was a real fear of mine. Well, one of the lawyers gave that dreaded response, real snarky, which lawyers, of course, comes naturally to us to be snarky, I guess. But she said, well, how do you know you're not just hearing voices in your head? How do you know you're not schizophrenic? And fortunately, I had an answer for her to shoot back at her that was not fuck off. It was accuracy. And I left it there. Accuracy. So accuracy is how we prove it. And we do need to prove what we're doing. That's really important. We got to prove it. We got to prove it to ourselves first and foremost. And the more skills you get, the more practice you get, then the higher your accuracy rate goes up, and you are proving it. You are proving to people that you've got a special connection. You are connected in with a soul, either their soul and you're doing a psychic reading, or you're connected in mediumistically to somebody who's deceased. So proving it is huge. And yet, the more work that you do, the more like along that spectrum you get, the more you start getting communications from beings that you can't prove. Like, I cannot prove to anybody that I have had angel communications. I can't prove that. But what am I going to do? I'm not going to give the message. I have to give the message. So even like in me, I'm so skeptical, and being a healthy skeptic is huge. It is huge. And all of you, I want all of you to be healthy skeptics of everybody out there, and healthily skeptical about yourself as well, because it gets your ego out of the way and it forces you to get skills and practice and start practicing on people. But the more you do, and if angels are talking with you, because some people get angel communication right away, that's the first thing they're getting. They're like, oh my gosh, I can't prove it. So the funny thing about, I'll tell you two things actually. I gave a reading yesterday, and the spirit of mercy came in, the spirit of compassion. And it was so shocking because that's the first time I've talked with this spirit, and he didn't, I'm giving him a male identity. It's probably a being. But he didn't call himself an angel or an archangel. He called himself something very specific. So I just rolled with it. I gave that information, and I came through in a reading about something else. And I was like, I better just keep going. I'm going to give this, and we'll see what happens. And it was well received. It was fine. The other end of the spectrum, there'll be people out there who are practicing, but they don't believe in other things. And let me tell you what I'm talking about here. There's a medium, very, very famous old school medium named Mavis Patilla. And when I mean old school, she's an old school British medium. And if you guys don't know the history of sort of mediumship in the modern era, the Brits were the leaders, recently in bringing about mediumship in a very grounded, practical, evidentiary way. It's evidence-based work. And in fact, the Brits make you do a very specific meditation every day for a single year before you can even start learning mediumship at all. So they're real sticklers. Us Americans don't do that because we're too impatient. But it is good practice. But Mavis said she's so evidence-based that she didn't believe in angels at all. She did not even believe angels existed. So how can you be a medium? She's like 78. She's in her 70s now. And it's only like in the last year or so that she's actually started to believe in angels. And I'm like, you're a medium. You're like one of the world's most famous mediums. How have you done this work for so long that you didn't believe in angels? But her answer to that was always, prove it. You cannot prove to me that an angel exists. And I was like, wow, that's fascinating. And apparently one of our own students is such an adept medium angel communicator that over the course of working with Mavis, that Mavis started believing in angels. So it's interesting. So there's going to be people all across the spectrum. There will be people who are really skeptical and they're actually kind of teasing you or poking the bear, like that Lady Lawyer was to me. Which was unnecessary, but just kind of wanting me to prove myself to her. I've had a reading once with a woman who, it was an in-person reading, and before I opened my mouth, and she had already paid me, and she was very specific about what healing she needed. She said, by the way, I want to let you know right out of the blocks, I don't believe in any of this shit. I was like, okay. Whew, this is going to be a long hour. But I proved it. I just went with the reading. I'm like, you don't have to believe it. I just went with it. And I just gave her everything I had. And that has come up with me a lot. It's something I had to get over when past lives come up with people. I'm like, oh, crap, I can't prove this. You got a past life. But over time, over accuracy, then it's a pattern that they're very familiar with. But all this to just say, you do need to prove it. You've got to have skills. You got to have knowledge, and practice. But you are going to get to a point where there's that leap of faith. And you might be surrounded by people who don't believe you. Get them out of your sandbox. Tell them to go play somewhere else, because that's not who you need to be around. But be a healthy skeptic yourself. Be skeptical. Get knowledge. Because that's the way we get over that fear that we're going to be deemed a fraud, because that's our biggest fear, right? We don't want anybody to think that we're making it up or we're an attention seeker or we're a fraud. We actually really do have skills or abilities that can be turned into skills. But you do that by proving it. You do it by accuracy. So work with me, call me, reach out, private message me, get on my books, or I have a course coming out in February that I'm super excited about that's going to get you into your knowing. It's going to get you lots and lots of practice, and then never stop. Never, ever, ever stop. Keep going. All right. Bye.